The human ship drifted down through the silver skies of Aradia, a world known for its tall crystal towers and glowing rivers. Aaron, a young explorer chosen for this peace mission, stood at the front window. He pressed his hand against the glass and looked in awe at the strange beauty below. He had traveled far from Earth, but he had never seen a planet shine like this. Behind him, the other members of the human team prepared their gifts of technology and knowledge. This was not a mission of war. It was a mission of peace, a first step toward an alliance between humans and the proud people of Aradia. Aaron, however, was chosen for a reason beyond his skills. He was steady, calm, and had the rare courage to step forward when others hesitated. The ship landed in a grand courtyard made of blue stone. Hundreds of alien citizens gathered to watch the visitors. Their tall figures stood upright like statues, and their long robes shimmered under the sunlight. At the far end of the courtyard, upon a raised platform, sat the royal court. At its center was Princess Vera. Vera was young but carried herself with the strength of her ancestors. Her silver crown rested upon her dark hair, and her sharp eyes studied every detail of the humans who approached. The air felt heavy as Aaron and his companions walked forward. The princess's guards, dressed in golden armor, lowered their spears in warning. Aaron bowed politely, but his eyes never left hers. He could feel the weight of her gaze, and he knew this first meeting would decide the future of two civilizations. His leader began to speak words of greeting, offering the gifts they had brought. The crowd remained silent, waiting for their princess to respond. But before she could, the ground trembled. A deep cracking sound echoed across the courtyard. Aaron looked up and saw one of the tall energy pillars that supported the palace roof beginning to break apart. Blue sparks leapt from its surface, and shards of crystal rained down toward the platform where the princess sat. Without a thought, Aaron rushed forward. His boots slammed against the stone floor as he pushed past the guards. He threw himself onto the platform and pulled the princess out of the way just as the pillar shattered behind them. The crash thundered through the courtyard, and dust filled the air. For a moment, there was silence. Aaron held the princess by her arm, steadying her as the crowd gasped. But instead of thanks, he saw fire in her eyes. She tore her arm free and lifted her hand, her palm glowing with a faint silver light. "Dare to touch me again, human, and you will regret it," she said, her voice echoing across the courtyard. The crowd erupted in whispers. The guards rushed forward, pointing their spears at Aaron. He stood still, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, but his eyes never looked away from hers. He had not acted out of disrespect. He had acted out of instinct, the same instinct that had carried humans through danger for centuries. Vera's face was hard, her pride unshaken. In her world, no man outside her royal bloodline was allowed to touch her. What Aaron saw as rescue, she saw as an insult to her honor before her people. Yet, deep within her sharp gaze, there was a flicker of hesitation. She had felt the strength in his grip, the speed with which he had acted. Without him, the pillar might have crushed her. The human leader stepped forward, his voice calm. "Princess, forgive him. He meant only to protect you. No harm was intended." But Vera raised her hand again, silencing all voices. She looked at Aaron as if measuring the weight of his soul. Finally, she turned away, her robe swirling as she returned to her throne. "This meeting continues," she said coldly. "But let the humans know their place." The guards lowered their weapons but did not move far from Aaron. He stepped back quietly, his jaw tight but his spirit unbroken. He had not come to this world to bow in fear. He had come to show that humans could stand as equals, even before alien royalty. The rest of the meeting was filled with formal words and promises, but the memory of that moment lingered. The people of Aradia would not forget the sight of a human daring to touch their princess. And the princess herself would not forget the strange feeling that still burned on her arm where his hand had been. As the sun set over the crystal towers, Aaron returned to the human ship with his team. His companions spoke in low voices about the warning, about the danger of offending the royal court. But Aaron said nothing. He sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the glowing horizon of the alien city. He had acted without thinking, but he would not take it back. If the choice came again, he would still reach out his hand. For in that single moment, when stone and crystal rained down, he had seen not a princess or a throne. He had seen a life that needed saving. And no law, no warning, no crown could stop him from doing what was right. Far away, inside her high chamber, Princess Vera stood before her mirror. She lifted her hand and looked at the faint mark left on her skin where the human had touched her. Her pride told her to be angry, to remember his boldness as an insult. But her heart whispered something different, something she refused to say aloud. For the first time in many years, the Princess of Aradia could not fully understand her own thoughts. And that small uncertainty, born from the hand of a human, troubled her more than any falling pillar. The following morning, the human delegation walked again toward the palace gates. Aaron walked a step behind his leader, his thoughts heavy with the memory of the day before. The princess's sharp words still echoed in his mind. He had saved her, yet she had looked at him with anger, not gratitude. He told himself it did not matter. He had acted as he should. Still, a part of him felt the sting of her warning. The palace of Aradia was alive with light. Long energy pillars glowed softly, holding up the roofs like shining spears. Their glow painted the walls in blue and silver. The humans had never seen a city like this. Yet as Aaron walked, his eyes noticed small details that others missed. Thin cracks ran along the bases of some pillars. The light within them flickered for seconds before steadying again. To most, it looked like nothing. To Aaron, who had spent years studying structures on alien worlds, it looked like danger. He stopped for a moment and touched his scanner, a small device on his wrist. A faint hum confirmed his suspicion. Energy flow inside the pillars was not steady. Something was wrong deep within them. "Move, human," one of the guards barked, shoving him lightly forward. Aaron nodded and walked on, but his mind raced. Why would such a proud palace show signs of weakness? The pillars were supposed to last for centuries. He decided he would speak to someone about it after the meeting. Inside the throne room, Princess Vera sat tall on her seat of silver stone. Her expression was calm, but her eyes lingered on Aaron for a brief moment before turning to his leader. She listened as the humans spoke of trade, of knowledge, and of peace. Her words in return were sharp but polite, never showing weakness. The court nodded along with her decisions. Aaron, however, found it hard to keep silent. He glanced again at the walls and saw another line of faint cracks stretching upward. He leaned toward one of the alien guards. "There is damage to the structure. You should check the pillars." The guard gave him a cold look. "You speak too much, human. The palace of Aradia does not break." Aaron frowned but said nothing more. Instead, he let his scanner quietly record the readings. When the meeting ended, the humans were led back outside to the courtyard. The crowd of citizens still whispered whenever they saw Aaron, pointing toward him as if he had committed a crime. He ignored their stares, but he could feel the distance between him and everyone else growing wider. That night, as the human team rested in the guest chambers, Aaron reviewed the scans. The numbers were clear. The flow of energy was being disrupted. It was no accident of age. Someone was interfering with the palace itself. Sabotage. He turned to his leader, a calm man named Ryan. There is danger here. The pillars are failing. If they collapse, the princess and her people will suffer. Ryan shook his head. We are not here to interfere with their ways. They already mistrust us after what happened. If we warn them now, they will think we insult their strength. We must remain quiet. But if I stay quiet, lives could be lost, Aaron said firmly. Ryan sighed. Aaron, think carefully. You are one man, a guest on a foreign world. Do not risk our mission by speaking out of turn. Tomorrow we return to the council. Let the princess handle her own palace. Aaron clenched his fists. He respected his leader, but he could not ignore what he had seen. He left the chamber and walked out into the cool night air. The city was silent under the stars. From the courtyard, he looked up at the palace towers. Their glow still shimmered, but in his eyes, they no longer looked eternal. They looked fragile. At that very hour, Princess Vera stood on her balcony. Her mind was restless. She looked down at her arm where the human had once held her. She had told herself to forget, to be angry, to let pride burn away the memory. Yet, the image of his eyes, steady and unafraid, would not leave her. She saw him now in the courtyard, alone under the night sky. His figure was still and thoughtful. Her chief advisor, Lord Callan, stepped behind her. Princess, you should rest. The humans will leave soon. Their kind is reckless. Yesterday proved it. We must remain firm and never show weakness. Vera nodded slowly, but her gaze lingered on the human below. Reckless, yes. But in that moment of danger, he had acted faster than any of her own guards. That memory scratched at her pride. The next morning, Aaron decided to speak to her directly. When the humans entered the throne room once more, he stepped forward. Princess, he said clearly, before anyone else could speak. The court gasped. No human had the right to address her without invitation. Guards lifted their spears, but Vera raised her hand to stop them. Her sharp eyes narrowed at him. You speak out of turn, human. Aaron bowed slightly but did not retreat. Your palace is in danger. The energy pillars are cracked. The flow is unstable. Someone is tampering with them. If you do not act, they may collapse. The court burst into laughter and anger. Advisors shouted, calling him arrogant. One cried out, he dares to insult the strength of Aradia. Vera silenced them again with a gesture. She looked at Aaron for a long moment, her eyes like cold steel. You dare to speak of things you cannot understand. You humans are guests here, nothing more. Take care that your words do not shame your people further. Aaron felt the heat of her rejection, but he stood firm. I do not wish to insult you, princess. I only wish to protect lives. Whether you believe me or not, the danger is real. The guards moved closer, and Ryan stepped forward quickly. Forgive him, princess. He forgets himself. Vera turned away. See that he remembers next time. The humans were led from the hall, but the damage was done. Whispers spread through the palace like wildfire. The alien princess had been warned by a human, and she had dismissed him. To the court, Aaron was now more than a reckless man. He was a symbol of insult. Yet deep inside, as she returned to her private chamber, Vera could not shake the echo of his voice. He had spoken with such certainty, not fear. Her pride forced her to reject him, but her heart whispered again. What if he was right outside, in the guest chambers? Aaron sat by the window with his scanner in hand. He could feel the broken trust growing around him like chains. Still, he could not forget what he had seen. He knew one thing with absolute clarity. The pillars were failing, and when they fell, no warning from the princess or her court would stop the destruction. And he would be there, ready to act, whether they trusted him or not. The night in Aradia was quiet, but Aaron's mind was not. He sat alone in the guest chamber with his small wrist scanner, watching the faint lines on the screen. The energy pillars of the palace showed the same strange pattern, their flow broken in places as if someone had cut into their veins. It was not natural. It was not age. It was the hand of someone working in the shadows. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment, but his heart refused to rest. He had not come here to accuse or insult. Yet every time he tried to stay silent, he remembered the sight of the pillar shattering above Princess Vera's throne. He remembered her sharp words, the warning never to touch her again. But he also remembered the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She had felt something too, even if she refused to admit it. Aaron rose to his feet and walked to the balcony of the chamber. The city stretched before him, shining under the light of 2 moons. From this height, he could see the long streets of crystal, the glowing rivers that ran through the city, and the tall towers that rose like spears against the sky. It was beautiful, but beauty could not hide danger. Somewhere in those walls, someone was cutting at the heart of the palace. He decided to investigate. While the rest of the human team slept, Aaron slipped quietly through the halls. The palace was guarded, but the guards did not look at him closely. They thought he was a guest, nothing more. He carried only his scanner, which gave off a faint glow as he passed the tall pillars. The device beeped softly when it found another crack, deeper than the last. The damage was spreading. He followed the signal down into the lower halls of the palace, where few people walked at night. The air was cooler here, filled with the hum of the energy lines running through the walls. He stopped at a wide archway and studied the scanner again. The screen showed heavy interference nearby. He stepped forward and touched the stone wall. His fingers found a fine line cut into it. Someone had placed a device there, hidden under the surface. He pressed gently, and the stone gave way. A small metal shard fell into his hand. It was unlike Aratian design. It looked like a parasite feeding on the flow of energy. Aaron closed his fist around it. Proof. Someone inside the palace was working to bring the towers down. Before he could return, footsteps echoed in the hall. He hid quickly behind a pillar. 2 alien figures in dark cloaks walked past. Their voices were low, but Aaron could make out some of their words. The work is almost complete. Soon the pillars will fail, and the court will fall. Then she will have no throne to sit on. His heart beat faster. They were speaking of Princess Vera. This was no accident of age or time. This was sabotage meant to destroy her rule. He clenched his teeth and forced himself to stay silent as the 2 figures passed into the shadows. When the hall was empty again, Aaron returned to the chamber, the shard still in his hand. He knew what he had heard, what he had seen. But he also knew the princess would not believe him. She had already dismissed his warning once. If he walked into her throne room now and spoke of hidden enemies, she might see him as a liar or worse, as a human trying to spread fear. Still, he could not ignore the truth. He sat by the window until morning, staring at the shard in his hand. When the sun rose, the humans returned once more to the palace court. The day was filled with more formal speeches, gifts, and rituals. Aaron listened quietly, his eyes always on the pillars. They still stood tall, glowing brightly, but he could see the cracks that others ignored. After the ceremony, he saw Princess Vera walking through the garden with her guards. He decided to take the risk. He stepped forward, holding the shard in his hand. "Princess," he called, his voice steady. The guards moved at once, blocking his path, but Vera raised her hand. She looked at him with the same cold pride as before. "You dare again to speak without leave. What do you want this time?" Human Aaron opened his palm and showed her the shard. "This was inside your walls. It is not yours. It is eating the energy from the pillars. I heard men last night speaking of your fall. Someone is working against you from within." The guards hissed, demanding he stop. One shouted that it was a trick, another that the humans sought to plant lies. But Vera's eyes were fixed on the shard. Her face did not change, yet her hand trembled ever so slightly. "You speak boldly," she said. "Too boldly. Do you think I will believe your words after you insulted me before my people?" "I do not ask you to believe me," Aaron said firmly. "I ask you to see for yourself. The danger is real. Your life is in danger, princess. That is the truth." For a moment, the garden fell silent. The alien wind rustled the tall silver leaves of the trees, and the river nearby glowed softly. Vera studied him, her sharp eyes unreadable. Finally, she turned away. "Leave the shard," she ordered. Aaron placed it on the stone bench beside her. The guards pulled him back roughly, but he did not resist. He had done what he could. Whether she acted or not was now her choice. As he walked away, he could feel her eyes still on him. She would not admit it, not to him, not to her guards, but he had seen it. For the first time, doubt had entered her heart. That night, in her private chamber, Vera held the shard in her hand. She turned it under the light of her lamp, her mind filled with questions. The human had risked angering her again. Why would he lie if he had nothing to gain? She thought of his steady voice, his unbroken gaze, his strange courage. She thought of the words she had overheard long ago from her own advisors about enemies inside the palace. Her pride whispered that he was arrogant. Her heart whispered something else. Somewhere deep within the palace, cloaked figures moved through the shadows, placing more shards into the walls. The hidden threat was growing stronger. And though Vera did not yet admit it aloud, she knew the human's words were not without weight. For the first time, she wondered if she had judged him too quickly. The great feast of Aradia was a sight unlike anything the human team had ever seen. The throne hall had been transformed into a shining hall of crystal and silver light. Long tables stretched across the floor, filled with exotic fruits, glowing drinks, and dishes that steamed with strange colors. Musicians played soft tones on long silver instruments, their sound echoing like wind through mountains. The alien nobles, dressed in bright robes, filled the room with laughter and pride. At the center, Princess Vera sat upon her raised throne, a crown of silver threads woven into her hair. Her expression was calm, her eyes sharp. She looked down at the humans who sat as guests at one of the long tables. Aaron sat quietly among them, his eyes scanning the hall. He could not relax. The shard he had found still weighed on his mind, and the memory of the cloaked figure's words still rang in his ears. His wrist scanner rested hidden beneath his sleeve. Every few minutes, he glanced at it. The readings were faint but troubling. The energy lines inside the palace were restless, as if being pulled apart. The feast began with speeches. Advisors praised the greatness of Aradia. Nobles spoke of tradition and honor. The princess raised her cup and welcomed the guests. Everyone lifted their glasses in return. Yet Aaron's hand did not move. His eyes were drawn upward. The tall energy pillars that held the ceiling glowed as always, but tonight their light flickered more than before. A faint crack echoed through the hall. No one else seemed to notice, but Aaron's heart tightened. He stood slowly, scanning the ceiling. His leader, Ryan, grabbed his arm and whispered, "Sit down. Do not bring shame again." But before Aaron could answer, the sound came again, louder this time. A line of blue sparks ran across the pillar closest to the throne. Aaron's eyes widened. He had seen this before. It was the same sign as the day the pillar had fallen. Then, chaos struck. With a roar of breaking stone, one of the pillars burst apart, spraying shards of crystal across the hall. Screams filled the air. At the same time, the grand doors of the hall slammed open, and dozens of figures in dark armor stormed inside. Their weapons glowed with red energy, cutting through the guards who tried to block their way. "Protect the princess," a voice shouted. The court erupted into panic. Nobles fled behind tables. Guards clashed with the attackers, but the dark soldiers moved with deadly skill. Aaron leapt to his feet. His eyes went straight to Vera, who stood firm at her throne, her hand glowing with silver light as she called upon her power. Her guards formed a shield around her, but the attackers pressed forward without fear. Aaron did not think. He pushed past the fleeing nobles and ran straight toward the throne. The memory of her warning came back to him, her voice telling him never to touch her again. But warnings meant nothing now. This was no time for pride. This was life or death. One of the armored attackers raised his weapon toward the princess. Aaron slammed into him from the side, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. The weapon flew from the attacker's hands, and Aaron grabbed it, twisting it until it broke with a sharp crack. The guards looked at him in shock, unsure whether to stop him or let him fight. But Aaron did not wait for their judgment. He stood in front of the throne, fists clenched, ready to face anyone who dared come near the princess. Vera's eyes widened as she saw him. For the second time, this human had thrown himself into her danger without hesitation. She opened her mouth to speak, but another wave of attackers rushed forward. Aaron grabbed a fallen spear from one of the alien guards and held it firmly. His stance was untrained compared to theirs, but his determination was clear. The battle raged. The court filled with the clash of weapons, the cries of the wounded, and the crack of breaking stone. Aaron fought with all his strength. He ducked under a swinging blade, drove the spear into an attacker's leg, and shoved another backward with his shoulder. His movements were rough, but his speed and courage filled the gaps in his skill. The princess raised her hand, sending a wave of silver light that knocked 3 attackers across the hall. Her power was great, but even she could not strike them all at once. Aaron stepped in where her guards fell, blocking blades with his spear, pulling wounded guards back, and standing like a wall in front of her. For the first time, Vera hesitated. She had once told herself he was reckless, an insult to her honor. But now she saw the truth with her own eyes. This human did not care for her crown or her throne. He cared only for her life. As the battle dragged on, the attackers began to fall back. The guards of Aradia regrouped, pushing them toward the door. The last pillar trembled but did not break. Finally, the enemy retreated into the night, leaving behind broken weapons and fallen comrades. The hall was a ruin of shattered crystal and overturned tables. Nobles cowered in corners, and guards rushed to tend to the wounded. Aaron stood in the center, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, the broken spear still in his hands. His clothes were torn, his arms scratched, but his eyes were steady. Princess Vera stepped down from her throne. Her robe swept across the floor as she approached him. The hall grew silent. All eyes turned to see what she would do. She stopped just a step away from him. Her gaze was sharp, but not with anger. She looked at the human who had once dared to touch her and who had now dared again to stand as her shield. Her hand lifted slowly, not in warning this time, but as if she meant to speak. Yet she let it fall again, folding it back at her side. Her pride would not allow her to thank him before her court, but her silence was louder than any words. The guards bowed before her, awaiting her orders. Vera raised her voice. The enemy has shown itself. This was not fate. This was not weakness. This was betrayal. We will find those who strike at us from the shadows. The court roared with support. Aaron stepped back quietly, but Vera's eyes followed him for a moment longer. She had once told him to never touch her again. Now, as she looked at the torn sleeve of his shirt and the blood on his arm, she realized something she would not admit aloud. Without that human, she might not be standing at all. In the silence of her heart, a new thought whispered to her. Perhaps trust was not found in words or pride, but in actions. And in that night of shadows and blood, the human had proven more loyal than many of her own. The sun rose over Aradia, but the palace did not wake in peace. The grand hall was still scarred from the night before. Broken crystal lay scattered across the floor, and the faint smell of smoke clung to the air. Servants rushed to clean the ruin, guards doubled their patrols, and whispers carried through every corridor. The attack had shaken the court to its core. Princess Vera stood at her balcony, her hands folded tightly. She looked out at the shining city, but her mind was not calm. The memory of the battle would not leave her. She had fought with all her strength, yet it was the human, Aaron, who had stood before her like a shield. She remembered the way he moved without fear, the way he had thrown himself into danger as if her life mattered more than his own. Her pride told her to dismiss it, to remind herself that he was reckless, that his boldness had insulted her once before. But deep inside, she could not deny the truth. He had saved her again. Twice now, he had risked everything for her. That thought left a weight in her chest she did not understand. Her advisor, Lord Callan, entered the chamber. His face was grave. Princess, the council demands answers. They say last night's attack proves weakness. Some whisper that the humans brought this curse with them. Vera's eyes narrowed. The humans fought at my side. I saw it with my own eyes. Aaron stood where many of our own fell. Do not speak lies to me. Callan bowed his head but said nothing more. Vera turned away, her thoughts sharper than his words. Later that day, she summoned Aaron and his leader, Ryan, to the War Council chamber. The room was round, its walls carved with the history of Aradia, showing kings and queens of old raising their blades against enemies. Around the table sat the high advisors and generals, their faces tense. Vera's voice was steady as she began. Our enemy hides within our walls. Last night's attack was planned. They struck at our pillars, at my throne, and at the lives of my people. We cannot wait for them to strike again. We must act. The generals nodded, their hands gripping their swords. One of the advisors, an older woman, spoke sharply. But how, Princess? We do not know who among us has betrayed you. We cannot strike blindly. Vera's eyes turned to Aaron. He stood tall, though the cuts on his arms were still raw. His simple human clothes looked rough against the shining robes of the court, but his presence was steady. What does the human say? Vera asked suddenly. The council erupted in shock. Princess, you cannot ask him, one cried. He has no place in our council, another shouted. But Vera raised her hand, and silence fell. Aaron's voice was calm. The attackers used shards to break your energy lines. I found one before the feast. Someone is planting them inside your palace. That means your enemy is not outside the walls. They are already here, among you. The council whispered in alarm. Some looked at him with suspicion, others with anger, but a few could not hide their unease. Vera's sharp eyes studied Aaron. If what you say is true, then this enemy has moved deeper than I thought. She leaned forward slightly. How would humans face such a threat? Ryan looked nervous, but Aaron answered without hesitation. We would not wait for another attack. We would search every hall, every shadow, until the traitors revealed themselves. We would fight them on our terms, not theirs. The generals grumbled, but Vera smiled faintly, though only for a moment. She turned to her court. Then that is what we will do. We will root out this threat, and we will do it with both human and Aratian strength. The words struck the chamber like lightning. An alien princess had just spoken of humans as allies. Half the council looked furious, the other half uncertain, but none dared challenge her openly. When the meeting ended, Aaron walked through the palace corridors beside Vera. Guards followed at a distance, their eyes suspicious. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Vera stopped at a tall window and looked out at the city below. You are bold, human, she said quietly. Too bold. You speak in my council as if it were your own. Yet your words carry weight. My people may not see it, but I do. You fight not for your world but for mine. Why? Aaron looked at her, his gaze steady. Because lives are lives. It does not matter if they are human or Aratian. If I can protect them, I will. That is who I am. Her eyes softened for a brief second, though her voice remained sharp. You speak as if you carry no fear. I feel fear, Aaron admitted. But I do not let it decide for me. Vera studied him in silence. Her pride still stood between them, yet she could not deny the strange respect growing in her heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to walk beside him without anger. That evening, as the palace prepared for war, Aaron trained with the Aratian guards. At first they mocked his rough stance and unfamiliar style. But when they sparred, they quickly learned his strength was not to be ignored. His movements were not graceful like theirs, but they were sharp, fast, and unpredictable. By the end, even the proudest guards nodded with respect. From the balcony above, Vera watched quietly. She remembered the first moment he had touched her arm, how she had raised her hand in fury. Now, she lowered her hand and folded it at her side, her heart caught between pride and something she did not wish to name. The alliance was fragile. Many in the court still mistrusted the humans, and whispers of betrayal grew louder. Yet the bond between the princess and the human was forming, built not on words but on battles shared. The shadows in the palace were growing darker, but so too was a light beginning to rise. The night before the battle was heavy with silence. Torches flickered across the walls of the Aratian palace, casting long shadows on the polished stone. Guards stood with sharp eyes, weapons close to hand. Servants moved quickly, carrying supplies and sealing the gates. Every corner of the palace was prepared for war, yet the air carried a tension that could not be erased. Princess Vera walked through the grand hall, her footsteps echoing against the high ceiling. The banners of her house hung torn and burned, reminders of the attack that had shaken her throne. She touched one of the banners, her fingers brushing against the scorched fabric. For the first time in many years, she felt the weight of her crown pressing down on her shoulders. Aaron entered the hall, his face stern, his simple clothes stained with the marks of training. He stopped when he saw her, waiting until she turned toward him. "The enemy will strike soon," he said. "We both know it. Tonight or tomorrow, they will make their move. Are your people ready?" Vera lifted her chin, her pride unbroken. "My guards will not falter. My generals stand ready. The throne of Aradia will not fall while I breathe." Aaron studied her closely. He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had burned during every battle. But he also saw the shadow of doubt she tried to hide. He stepped closer, his voice calm. "Then I will stand with you. No matter what comes." For a moment, her proud mask slipped. She looked at him, not as a human outsider, but as a warrior who had proven himself again and again. She gave a small nod. "Then let us face it together." The night deepened. The palace was quiet, but not for long. At midnight, the silence shattered. A horn echoed across the walls, followed by the clash of steel. Shadows moved through the palace gates. Figures cloaked in black stormed forward, their blades glowing with stolen crystal energy. The enemy had come. Vera rushed to the throne room, her guards forming a wall around her. Aaron was at her side, his heart pounding but his grip steady on his blade. The walls shook as explosions rocked the outer halls. The throne room doors burst open. From the darkness stepped Lord Callan, the very advisor who had once bowed before Vera. His eyes burned with cold fury. "You were never fit to rule, princess," he shouted, his voice echoing. "You trust humans, you weaken our blood. Tonight, the throne will be cleansed." Gasps filled the chamber. Betrayal had shown its face at last. Vera's voice rang like steel. "Callan, you dare raise your hand against your queen, you will pay with your life." Callan sneered. Behind him poured soldiers in black armor, their movements swift and brutal. The traitors struck with blades and shards, cutting down loyal guards. The battle for the throne had begun. Aaron leaped into the fight, his blade meeting enemy steel. He fought with raw strength, striking faster than many thought possible. His movements were not graceful, but they were deadly. Every swing was driven by the will to protect, not to conquer. Vera drew her twin blades, glowing with the power of her people. She moved like a storm, her strikes sharp and precise. Enemies fell before her, but they kept coming, their numbers overwhelming. The throne room became a sea of chaos. Shouts, the clang of swords, and the crackle of crystal shards filled the air. Guards loyal to Vera held their ground, but the enemy pressed harder, trying to break their line. Aaron fought near the princess, his back to hers. At one point, an enemy lunged toward Vera, blade raised high. Aaron moved without thought, blocking the strike with his arm before slamming his weapon into the attacker. Blood poured from his wound, but he did not falter. Vera glanced at him, shock flashing in her eyes. "You fool, you are bleeding." Aaron gritted his teeth. Better me than you. Keep fighting. Her chest tightened, but she turned back to the battle, her blades cutting through the traitors. She could not let herself falter now. At the far end of the hall, Callan raised a crystal shard and struck it into the ground. The throne room shook as a wave of dark energy surged across the floor, knocking guards off their feet. The pillars cracked, dust falling from above. Your throne will crumble, Callan shouted. Your reign ends tonight. But Vera stood tall, her blades crossed before her. Her voice cut through the chaos. No, Callan. My reign begins tonight. She charged forward, her guards rallying to her side. Aaron followed close, his wounds slowing him but not stopping him. Together, they pressed toward the traitor leader. The battle reached its peak. Every strike, every cry of pain, every clash of steel shook the throne room. Aaron's strength was fading, but he pushed on, his focus locked on protecting the princess. Vera's arms ached, yet her will burned brighter than ever. At last, she reached Callan. Their blades clashed in a storm of sparks. He was strong, his strikes heavy with rage, but Vera was faster, her movements sharp with purpose. Aradia is not yours to take, she declared. It is mine to protect. With one final strike, she disarmed him. His blade clattered to the floor, and her sword pressed against his chest. The traitor froze, his eyes wide. The hall fell silent as the last of his soldiers were cut down by the loyal guards. Vera stood over Callan, her breathing heavy. For a moment, the weight of choice pressed on her. But before she could act, he lunged for a hidden dagger. Aaron, wounded but unyielding, moved first. He pushed Vera aside and drove his blade through Callan's hand, forcing the weapon to drop. The traitor cried out, his power broken. Vera's eyes met Aaron's. For the first time, her voice softened. You saved me again. Aaron gave a tired smile. It is what I do. The remaining traitors surrendered. The battle for the throne was over. But the palace was scarred, and the cost was high. Many had fallen, and the trust of the people had been shaken. Vera stood in the ruins of her throne room, her crown heavy upon her head. Yet she knew this night had proven more than her right to rule. It had shown her the strength of an unlikely bond. As dawn broke, light poured through the shattered windows, washing over the wounded and the weary. The war for her throne was not yet over, but one thing was certain. With Aaron at her side, she was no longer alone. The morning sun rose over the palace of Aradia, spilling golden light across the shattered banners, broken pillars, and the scars of the night's battle. The great hall had been cleaned of debris, but traces of the conflict remained. Guards walked steadily, keeping watch for any sign of remaining traitors. The city outside stirred, citizens moving cautiously, whispers of the battle spreading quickly. Princess Vera stood on the steps of her throne, her robes flowing like silver water. Her hair was tousled from the fight, and a faint cut marked her cheek, yet her posture was perfect, unbroken, commanding. The court gathered quietly, their faces a mix of relief, fear, and awe. The attack had ended, and the throne was safe, but their world had changed forever. Aaron stood slightly behind her, his clothes torn, hands still stained from the battle, and cuts across his arms. He did not step forward. He did not claim praise. He merely observed, his eyes sweeping across the court, ensuring that the princess and her people were unharmed. Vera's gaze lingered on him. She remembered the first day he had touched her, how she had raised her hand in anger. She remembered the moment in the hall of battle, when he had thrown himself in front of her, defying danger and defying her pride. She remembered every time his courage had shone brighter than fear. The court waited in silence, expecting words of judgment, celebration, or commands. Vera lifted her hand, the same hand that had once warned Aaron to never touch her again. This time, it was steady, calm, and purposeful. She did not raise it to strike, to warn, or to defend. She lowered it slowly, resting it lightly at her side. "All of you who witnessed this battle," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the hall, "know this. Last night, our enemies came from within. They struck at our palace, at our people, and at me. But the throne did not fall. My guards fought bravely. My people stood firm. And one human, whom I once warned, has shown courage beyond any expectation." Aaron's eyes widened slightly, but he did not move. He only listened. Vera continued, "This human did not act for glory or for honor. He acted to protect lives, to protect Aradia, to protect me. And in doing so, he proved that bravery is not found only in those who share our blood. It is found in all who choose to stand for what is right." The court was silent. The nobles looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Some felt anger that the princess praised a human. Others felt awe at the words themselves. The tension of the palace seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet respect that could not be ignored. Vera's eyes returned to Aaron. "Human, you have risked your life for a world not your own, for a princess you did not know, and for a people who might never fully trust you. For that, I thank you. You are no longer an outsider. You are an ally. You are trusted." Aaron stepped forward, though carefully, as if unsure how to respond. "Princess, I only did what anyone should do. No one deserves harm when it can be prevented." Vera smiled faintly, a soft light in her sharp eyes. "Perhaps. But not everyone acts so. That is why your actions are remembered. That is why your courage matters." The court shifted. Some of the nobles who had doubted the humans before now nodded quietly. The city would speak of this day for years to come. The humans, who had once been guests under suspicion, had proven their worth not by wealth, nor by knowledge, nor by words but by deeds. Vera turned back to her throne and placed her hand upon it lightly. She felt the weight of her ancestors, their guidance and strength. But she also felt something new. Trust. The knowledge that even in a world full of shadows, there were those who could be relied upon, those who could act with courage when others faltered. Aaron stepped closer, though not too near, respecting the distance she commanded. "Princess, if I may," he said quietly. "The palace still has threats. There may be others who wish to strike from the shadows. We must prepare." Vera nodded. "Yes. You are right. We will rebuild the palace stronger. We will train the guards. We will protect our people. And we will remain vigilant. But today, we celebrate survival, and we acknowledge courage where it is deserved." She looked at him one last time, her expression unreadable to all but him. The hand that had once warned him now carried no anger. No pride pressed it upward. It rested lowered, at ease, acknowledging the truth that he had risked everything without expectation, without fear, and without asking for reward. Aaron bowed slightly, not formally, but in respect. "Thank you, Princess. I will stand with you as long as you need me." Her eyes softened further, though she spoke only one word, "And we will stand together." The court erupted in cautious applause, the sound echoing against the high walls of the palace. Outside, the city began to stir. Word would spread quickly, the human had defended the princess, had fought bravely, and had earned the respect of an entire civilization. Later, as Vera walked through the palace gardens, she felt the sun on her face. She passed the fountains and silver trees, but her mind was on the events of the night. She had once believed pride and tradition were everything. Now, she understood that courage and trust could carry even greater weight. Aaron followed, silently, keeping to the shadows as he often did. They walked side by side without speaking, each understanding the other through deeds rather than words. The bond between them was quiet but unbreakable. At the edge of the garden, Vera paused. She looked at him and said softly, "Human, you came to a world that did not know your kind. You touched lives in ways you cannot imagine. Today, you are remembered not just as a visitor, but as one who changed history." Aaron shook his head humbly. "I only did what was right." Vera's hand lifted slightly, not in warning, but as if to acknowledge the moment. Then she lowered it again, resting it lightly at her side. The gesture said more than any words could. It was trust. It was acceptance. It was the first sign that a new story had begun, one where humans and Aratians might walk side by side. The palace was scarred, the city weary, but hope had returned. And in the quiet of the morning, a princess and a human stood together, knowing that courage and loyalty were stronger than fear or pride. The hand that had once warned was now lowered, and a new chapter for Aratia had begun.